Dear U.S. Forest Service and Shawn Cochran, Black Hills Forest Supervisor, my name is Taylor Gunhammer, and I am an enrolled citizen of the Oglala Sioux Tribe. I'm a board member of Black Hills Clean Water Alliance and an organizer at NDN Collective. I'm here today to address the recent decision of the U.S. Forest Service to rush toward approval of the drilling permit for the Golden Crest exploration project, despite the visible outrage and resistance of the public to the proposal. There were multiple lines of faulty reasoning that led to this extremely regrettable decision, but for the sake of time, I will try to prioritize the most egregious examples. A particularly mishandled aspect of the Forest Service's response was the choice to outright cancel an objection review meeting, a normal and expected part of the public comment process. Instead, Shawn Cochran has decided, via his objection responses after a paltry review, to reflexively accommodate the whims of the mining industry in the face of tribal opposition, general public opposition, and the unanimous opposition of the Spearfish City Council. To do less than the bare minimum at his actual job in order to effectively serve as a public relations firm for the metals and rare earth mining industry, and then avoid the backlash by refusing to perform normal functions of the public comment process, needless to say, is beyond objectionable. Now we will discuss some of the concerns surrounding the Forest Service's apparent position on treaties with tribal nations. As Mr. Cochran acknowledges in his findings, the entirety of the Black Hills is unceded Oceti-Sakowin treaty land. He also acknowledges the 1980 Supreme Court case that affirms the unequivocal theft of our treaty lands. He then goes on to say that the U.S. Forest Service does not independently negotiate, renegotiate, or determine treaty obligations, and that our legally affirmed treaty claims are outside the scope of this project. Mr. Cochran, we agree that a forest supervisor has no authority to arbitrate land claims between the United States and tribal nations. However, by improperly ramming this proposal past the public and through the mechanisms of a government agency as quickly as possible, what you have done exactly is unilaterally decided the issue in favor of a mining company and against Oceti-Sakowin treaty rights. How is it that when it comes to upholding the Fort Laramie Treaty, you have no power, but when it comes to permitting someone to violate it, you're the judge and jury? Next, we must speak to the phenomenon of the U.S. Forest Service failing to meet its federally mandated obligation to conduct meaningful tribal consultation about proposed projects on public lands. It is important to note that when I say meaningful consultation, I am not describing a streamlined process that permits the Forest Service to claim with minimal effort that it consulted a tribe and then can ignore everything else they say about what happens on their land. I am also not describing a circumstance where apparently any contact with a tribal official can be considered sufficient to check the box for all tribes concerned, and then promptly abandon the notion of tribal consultation altogether. Both scenarios I mentioned, however, are the unfortunate reality of the present. Given these conditions, it is even easy for a reasonable person to understand why a tribal official, even if they did receive a proposal notice, might hesitate to immediately provide validation to a process that does not appear to be working toward its stated goals in good faith. Indeed, when the results of any effort have historically been to minimize and shut out the indigenous voice entirely, it's rather awkward to try and elicit indigenous enthusiasm about it. National Environmental Policy Act regulations direct that federal agencies involve tribal governments to the extent practicable in preparing for environmental assessments. Mr. Cochran's own findings demonstrate that meaningful tribal consultation about Golden Crest did not actually occur, and that the bulk of the effort amounted to little more than a number of mailed letters that did not achieve the desired outcome of tribal engagement. He also points out that the Forest Service has only had one actual meeting with a tribal official about Golden Crest, and has only begun to engage tribes in conversations related to future consultation procedures and improving future communications as of February 21st, 2024. it is severely disingenuous to offer those findings and claim that every practicable effort has been made here. And finally, the Forest Service has also chosen to stand in direct opposition to an executive mandate calling for the traditional ecological knowledge, or TEK, of Indigenous peoples to serve as a federal framework for land management to mitigate climate change impacts. It would appear that this federal agency has simply ignored that mandate, which, to understate it wildly, reads like a grave miscarriage of duty and a betrayal of our shared future on this planet. Thanks for your time. Okay.
Thank you,